There is a man in his early 40s standing at a jewelry counter, ignoring a brand new smartwatch with a sapphire display and a waiting list 6 months long. He is staring at a 1962 Rolex Submariner. It has scratches on the bezel. The crown is slightly worn. He hasn't spoken in almost a minute. If you asked him why, he would say something about the craftsmanship, the history, the movement inside. But that answer is a costume. The real answer is older than that watch, and it has nothing to do with telling time.
This behavior happens everywhere. Grown professionals skipping luxury boutiques to haunt dusty estate sales. People who could buy anything, choosing to strap something older than their parents to their wrist. Collectors who know the reference number, the production year, the name of the watchmaker, but cannot fully explain why it matters to them the way it does. And almost none of them can put the real reason into words. Because the real reason doesn't live in the mind. It lives somewhere much quieter than that.
Understanding where it actually lives requires going back, not to childhood, but to what a mechanical watch actually is and what it represents in a world that has almost entirely abandoned it.
A classic watch is a machine that does one thing. It measures the passing of time using nothing but the tension of a wound spring releasing through a series of gears, jewels, and levers. No battery, no signal, no software update. Just physics made small enough to wear on your wrist. This is not an upgrade over modern timekeeping. A $10 phone keeps better time. Everyone knows this. And yet something in certain people refuses to let the mechanical watch go. The question is not what the watch does. The question is what the watch means.
Psychologists who study object attachment describe a phenomenon called material nostalgia, the way physical objects can carry emotional weight that transcend their function. But classic watch obsession runs even deeper than nostalgia. It is connected to something called terror management theory, the psychological framework that explains how humans cope with the awareness of their own mortality. Objects that are built to last, that outlive their owners, that carry the marks of multiple lifetimes on their dials. These objects offer something the modern world almost never does. They offer proof that something endures.
A 1960s Omega Seamaster that belonged to a grandfather, then a father, then arrives on the wrist of a son. That watch is not a timepiece anymore. It is a continuous thread. It is evidence that the people who came before were real, that their time meant something, that yours might too. But inheritance alone doesn't explain the behavior. Millions of people who obsess over vintage watches never inherited one. They sought them out, they found them, and this is where the cultural layer begins.
The mid-20th century was a specific kind of moment for the mechanical watch. The 1950s through the 1970s were the golden era of Swiss horology. Brands like Rolex, Patek Philippe, Omega, and Jaeger-LeCoultre were producing movements of extraordinary complexity, small enough to wear, precise enough to trust, and beautiful enough to pass down. These were not mass-produced disposables. They were considered. They were finished by hand. They were built with the assumption that they would outlast the person buying them. And they arrived in living rooms, in films, in the hands of people who shaped how an entire generation understood what it meant to be capable, composed, and present. Steve McQueen wearing a Heuer Monaco at Le Mans in 1971. Paul Newman and his Rolex Daytona, worn so long the dial aged into something unrepeatable. James Bond in the Submariner, not because it was expensive, but because it was precise, reliable, and quiet about it. These were not advertisements, they were cultural encoding. The watch on the wrist of a man who moved through the world with control and intention became inseparable from the idea of control and intention itself. A generation absorbed this without knowing they were absorbing it. The reminiscence bump tells us that experiences and images received between the ages of roughly 10 and 25 carry disproportionate emotional weight for life. For people who grew up watching those films, flipping through those magazines, watching their fathers wind their watches each morning in the bathroom mirror, the mechanical watch didn't just enter their awareness, it entered their identity. And then the quartz crisis happened. This is the layer most people around the collector cannot access. A partner watching someone spend months hunting a specific reference number, paying far more than a new watch would cost, sees a financial eccentricity. The person doing the hunting is engaged in something that feels closer to a vow. He is committing to an object that requires winding, servicing, and attention in a world that has engineered almost everything to require none of those things. The watch is not the point. The watch is a practice. And beneath the practice is a specific kind of grief that almost nobody names directly. The classic watch belongs to an era when things were built to last, when craftsmanship was a form of communication between maker and owner, when the object in your hand carried the fingerprints, literal and figurative, of the person who made it. That world is largely gone. The factories that now produce our objects are efficient and anonymous. Nothing needs to be wound, nothing requires your daily attention, and almost nothing is meant to be passed down. When someone straps a 60-year-old mechanical watch to his wrist, he is not rejecting the modern world. He is grieving something specific about it. He is carrying a small, ticking argument that some things should be made to outlast us. This is what the behavior actually is. Not status signaling, though that exists too. Not investment strategy, though that logic gets applied. It is something quieter and more essential. It is a man choosing every morning to be in relationship with an object that demands presence, that stops if you forget it, that marks time not with a notification, but with a sound so small you have to be still to hear it. The man at the jewelry counter finally picks up the 1962 Submariner. He turns it over. The caseback is plain steel, slightly warm from the display light. He doesn't know who wore it first. He doesn't know where it has been. But the weight of it in his palm is not the weight of metal. It is the weight of continued time. Of mornings someone else began by winding this exact mechanism, of a life that has already been lived inside the same ticking he is now holding. He sets it down. He will think about it for 3 weeks. He will come back. Because what he felt in that moment was not desire for an object. It was recognition of something he had almost stopped believing was still available. The feeling that some things are still made to last, that patience is still a form of intelligence, that the most honest thing a man can wear on his wrist is something that requires him to remember it is alive. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing.